3.2 is solving systems algebraically. Thank you for being such a great student and watching and taking notes on this video. So the first way that we're going to be solving is using substitution. You should write in your notes using substitution and write down these steps right underneath it. First, you want to solve one of the two equations, it does not matter which, for one of the variables. When I look at these two equations, I'm going to solve the second one for this variable. The reason why is because there's no coefficient in front, so it just makes it that much easier. So if I solve that equation, that would say y is equal to negative 2x plus 10. So this is like step number 1. And the second step is to plug this into the second equation. So I'm replacing y. So my second step here would look like this. 3x plus 4. Now instead of writing y, I write down this whole thing because this is what y is equal to. Plus 10 equals 12. And I should have wrote the other equation. Solve. So first I'm going to distribute this 4 into the equation, and I would have 3x plus a negative 8x plus 40 is equal to 12. This becomes a negative 5x will be equal to negative 28, and then divide by negative 5, and x will be equal to 28 over 5. And now what you do once you have your x, you plug that back into your equation that you solved for y. So I'd have negative 2 times 28 fifths plus 10, which would give me negative 56 fifths plus 10, which becomes negative 6 fifths. Once you have what your y is equal to and what your x is equal to, you always write it as an ordered pair. So in this case, my x is 28 fifths and my y is 6 fifths. And that would be my final answer right here. I want you to attempt this problem and solve it by substitution. You should have first solved the first equation for x and got negative 3y plus 5. Once you solve for y, you would get y equals negative 1/2. You plug that back into the equation that you solved for x, and you get 13/2. Again, your final answer you should always write as an ordered pair. The second way that we use algebra to solve a system of equations is using elimination. Again, I would be writing down the steps, and you should write those steps down in your notebook as a reference before you get started. Sorry for the handwriting, but I would make sure to pause the video and write down all of these 5 steps, but I will be going over them. The first step is you should pick one variable to cancel out when adding the two equations together. This problem already has the a variable that's already opposite of each other, these x's, so they will already cancel out. So I don't really have to do anything for problem 1, or for step 1. Second step is to actually add the two equations together. Again, it's always add. So 4x plus a negative 4x, these cancel out, would just give me 0. 2y plus 3y is going to give me a positive 5y. And 9 plus 16 is going to give me 25. So this is going to be my step 2. 3 is you solve for the remaining variable. One variable should cancel out. In this case, it was the x. Now I can solve the equation. 5y is equal to 25. Divide by 5. Y is going to be equal to 5. My fourth step is to plug it back in. It does not matter which equation I plug it into. I'm going to pick the first equation just because there's no rhyme or reason. So I'm going to have a 4x. Again, this is going to be my fourth step. 4x plus 2. And now I'm plugging my 5 into for my y is equal to 9. And I solve this. So 4x plus 10 is equal to 9. So 4x will be equal to, if I subtract 10, a negative 1. So x will be equal to a negative 1/4. That will be my answer. And then my final step, the fifth step, is to write it as an ordered pair. My x always goes first, negative 1/4. My y goes second, 5. Always should write your final answer as an ordered pair. Pause the video and attempt the next problem by yourself. And you should have gotten your answer to be 4, 0. And I labeled the steps for you. The first step already has my 8 by itself, or my y variable to cancel out when adding. Second step, when I added them together, I would get 3x plus 0 equals 12. Then I solve for x, which would be x equals 4. You plug it back in, it doesn't matter which equation, you get y equals 0. And then my fifth step is to write it as an ordered pair. Now the last two systems, solving by elimination, the variable was already opposite of each other. Now if you look here, the x's and the y's are not opposite of each other, so I have to choose a variable to cancel out. And just because I'm going to choose y, you could choose x and you will still get the same answer. So if I'm going to choose y, what I'm going to do is multiply both the top equation by a number and the bottom equation by a different number so that they cancel. A lot of times it will be whatever the coefficient is. So if I multiply this top equation by 5, that would get me 35 as my y. So I'd have 2x times 5 would give me 10x plus 35y equals 20. Again, you have to multiply it into every term. Now if I look at the second equation, in order for my y's to cancel, they have to be opposite. So right now if I have a positive 35, I need to make this term to be a negative 35. So I'm going to multiply by a negative 7. This would become a negative 21x minus 35y is going to be equal to 35. And now, since my y's are opposite, I can continue solving like normal. So pause the video and see if you get the same answer as I do. And you should have gotten negative 5, 2. One thing, once you get to the step where you figure out what the first variable is, you can use any of the 4 equations here. I could use either the 2 equations given or the 2 equations that I created. Either way, you should get a positive 2 for y. On this last slide, I want you to attempt to use either substitution or elimination to solve this. I will be telling you should pause the video and see what your answer is, but I will be using elimination to solve. Both these two systems of equations are special circumstances. Now when I use the elimination, both of my variables cancel out in both cases. However, in my first equation or system, I got the equation 0 equals 0. Once I simplified, this becomes a true statement. So if it's a true statement, that means my solution would be infinite solutions. True statement, infinite solutions. Now, in my second system of equations, I got 0 equals 16. This is a false solution. This does not make sense. So in this case, there is no solution. So infinite solutions means that they would be dependent because it would be the same line. No solution means the two lines would be parallel. So they would be inconsistent. Make sure you have every problem written down in your notebook. Have a wonderful evening.